In the quiet corners of forgotten towns, shadows move where no one dares to look. Secrets buried under dust, blood-stained fields and abandoned trailers whisper of lives stolen and horrors unseen. Tonight, you'll witness the chilling truth behind the smiles, the mundane, the familiar. Somewhere, someone is watching, and what you think you know is already a lie. I grew up in a quiet, forgotten place called Medicine Bow, Wyoming. A town swallowed by dust, gravel, and long stretches of silence. Most people only knew it for its railroad history or the fossil named Dippy that had long since been shipped off to a museum in Pittsburgh. But for those of us who lived there, it was a place filled with stories no one liked to tell. My mother raised me alone. She wasn't strict. Rules barely existed in our house. But there was one warning she repeated more than anything else. One rule that felt heavier than all the others combined. Never go near Bob Barnes' trailer. She never explained why in detail, just that he was dangerous. A monster, she called him. Bob Barnes lived on the very edge of town, near the dark waters of East Allen Lake. His trailer sat isolated, half swallowed by dead grass and crooked trees. People said he survived by digging through trash at night, collecting things to sell or rebuild. And if anyone ever spotted him in the darkness, they pretended they didn't. Because Bob Barnes had killed someone, and somehow he had never gone to prison. That alone was enough to keep most people far away. But the older folks added something worse. They'd lower their voices and say things like, "Don't go near the north side of the lake at night, unless you want to get mistaken for something he's hunting." They weren't joking. Still, not everyone spoke about him the same way. I remember one afternoon when I was about 14, a friend of mine brought Bob up while his mom was driving us somewhere. My friend talked about him like he was some kind of boogeyman lurking just outside town limits. But his mom reacted differently. "That poor man," she said quietly. "He just wants to be left alone." The car went silent. My friend immediately argued back, "Mom, he killed someone." And for a split second, something strange crossed her face, like she'd said something she wasn't supposed to, like a mask had slipped. Then, just as quickly, her expression hardened. "Yes, and that's exactly why you stay away from him." At the time, I didn't understand that moment. But years later, it would come back to haunt me. Because by the time I turned 17, I hated Bob Barnes. Not just feared him, hated him. And that hatred didn't come from rumors anymore. It came from the truth my mother finally told me one night when she had too much to drink. That night, I came home to find my mom sitting alone in the dim light of the living room, old photo albums spread out across the table. Her eyes were red, her hands slightly trembling as she stared at pictures from her high school days. Among them was a boy. "That's him," she whispered, "the one Bob Barnes killed." Her voice cracked as she told me everything she had never said before. Back in high school, that boy had been part of her friend group. He wasn't perfect. He drank too much, partied too hard, but according to her, he didn't deserve what happened to him. One night, he and a few others had gone out drinking near East Allen Lake. At some point, he wandered off into the bushes. That's when he saw something that made him shout. He saw a man carrying what looked like a child over his shoulder, a limp, unmoving child. Thinking something horrible was happening, he called out, and when the man tried to run, he gave chase along with his friends. But the moment they caught up, everything turned violent. The shooter dropped the child, spun around, and opened fire. Gunshots ripped through the silence of the night, fast, merciless, echoing across the lake. My mom's friend didn't even have time to react. He collapsed instantly, dead before he hit the ground. The others ran. The child was rushed to the hospital, but it was already too late. She'd been heavily drugged, her small body poisoned with tranquilizers. The damage was irreversible. She died soon after, and every single person there that night swore the same thing. The shooter was Bob Barnes. But here's the part that never made sense. He was never arrested, never charged, never punished. That truth burned into me like fire. From that moment on, every story, every warning, every uneasy silence about Bob Barnes turned into something darker inside me. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anger, pure, festering anger. Months passed, and that anger only grew. I told my friends everything. Around campfires late at night, we talked about him, about what he did, about how he got away with it. One of my friends even asked his dad about the story. The answer was unsettling. Yes, his dad confirmed. The girl died. That part's true. But there was something else, something small, but wrong. According to him, the girl wasn't found near the lake. She had shown up in town. That detail should have mattered more, but at the time, it didn't. Not to me. Because in my mind, the story was already written. Bob Barnes was a killer, and killers deserved consequences. So one night, sitting around that same fire, I made a decision. A terrible, reckless decision. I was going to burn his trailer down. Not to kill him. At least, that's what I told myself. In my head, he'd wake up, escape, and just lose everything he had. That would be his punishment. That's what I believed. But looking back now, I was just a kid playing with fire, literally and figuratively. And I had no idea what I was about to uncover. It took me a few days to gather the courage. I didn't have money for gasoline, so I stole a can of paint thinner from my school's art room. It wasn't much, but in my mind, it was enough. That Friday night, I told my friends I was heading home, but instead, I walked toward East Allen Lake. The journey felt longer than it actually was. The further I went, the quieter everything became. No wind, no insects, just the sound of my own breathing and footsteps crunching against gravel. When I finally got close, I turned off my flashlight. In the distance, I could see it, Bob Barnes' trailer, a faint, flickering glow from inside. I stayed hidden near the water's edge, watching, waiting. 40 minutes passed, then the light inside went out. Silence. That was my moment. My heart pounded violently as I crept closer, gripping the can in my hand. Every step felt louder than the last. My palms were sweating, my chest felt tight. But the trailer remained still. No movement, no sound. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. Just as I reached the side of the trailer and started to open the can, click. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked beside me. A cold voice followed. "What you got there, boy?" My entire body froze. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I dropped the can. A beam of light swept over it. He already knew. "Turn around," he said calmly. "I want to see your face before I decide what to do with you." I didn't respond, so he rushed me. Strong hands grabbed me and spun me around violently. I fell backward onto the dirt, staring up at him, paralyzed with fear. But then, something strange happened. He lowered the gun and just stared at me. Then he said my name. My blood ran cold. He knew exactly who I was. After a moment, he sighed, like he'd been expecting this. "I was wondering when you'd come," he muttered. Confusion replaced my fear, if only for a second. "How do you know me?" I managed to whisper. Instead of answering right away, he gestured toward the trailer. "Come inside. I'll tell you everything." Inside, the air smelled old, like dust, metal, and something faintly rotten. We sat across from each other. He asked me what my mom had told me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't hold back. I told him everything. How I hated him, how he killed her friend, how he ruined lives. He listened, silently. Then, when I was done, he nodded slowly. "All right, kid," he said. "Now let me tell you what really happened." The story he told was completely different. According to Bob, my mom's friend wasn't innocent. He had a history. Disturbing behavior, trouble with the police, incidents involving children that were quietly brushed aside, things no one wanted to talk about. And on that night, Bob had been out hunting near the lake when he spotted a group of drunk teenagers. Something about them didn't sit right, so he followed them from a distance. That's when he saw it. One of them was carrying a child, unconscious, limp. Bob got closer and heard enough to understand what they were planning to do. Something unspeakable. That's when he stepped in. He turned on his flashlight and shouted for them to stop. The one holding the child, my mom's friend, didn't run. He pulled out a knife, and just as he raised it toward the child, Bob fired 2 shots, straight to the chest. He dropped instantly. The others ran into the darkness. Bob picked up the child and carried her all the way back to town, leaving her at a gas station where someone could call for help. Then he turned himself in, but after everything was investigated, his story checked out. No charges, no prison, just silence. I sat there, unable to breathe properly. Everything I believed was collapsing. Bob leaned forward slightly. "I don't care if you believe me," he said, "but you should ask your mom." He paused. "Look her in the eyes and ask her if she was there that night." I did exactly that, and that conversation destroyed everything. I won't go into every detail, but I will say this. She couldn't deny it. She had been there. Not the one carrying the child, not the one with the knife, but she was part of that group, one of the ones who ran, one of the ones who got away. After that night, nothing was the same. I couldn't look at her the same way again. The lies, the guilt, the truth she buried for years. It broke something in me, and eventually I left. I haven't been back to Wyoming in almost 20 years, but sometimes, late at night, I still think about that trailer by the lake, and the man everyone thought was a monster. This happened back in 2002. My boyfriend and I were on a long drive from Chicago to a quiet little town in South Dakota called Vermilion, where his parents lived. It was supposed to be a normal road trip, music playing, casual conversation, nothing out of the ordinary. But somewhere in the middle of Iowa, things changed. We had been driving through endless cornfields for hours, tall, green walls of crops on both sides of the highway, so thick you could barely see a few feet beyond the road. Then suddenly, it all disappeared. The corn just stopped. It was like driving out of a forest and into something dead. For miles in every direction, the land was nothing but blackened earth, burned, charred. The ground looked like it had been swallowed by fire not too long ago. Ash drifted across the road in thin, ghostly trails. My boyfriend didn't think much of it. "Farmers burn fields sometimes," he said casually. "Prepares the soil." Maybe he was right, but something about it felt wrong. The silence outside seemed heavier. The sky looked duller, and the way the land stretched endlessly without life, it gave me this strange, creeping unease I couldn't shake. That's when I saw them. At first, they were just tiny shapes in the distance, two figures walking hand in hand across the burned field. As we got closer, I could make them out more clearly. An old man and a little boy. From far away, it looked almost peaceful, like a grandfather taking his grandson for a walk, showing him the aftermath of the fire. Something about the scene felt oddly staged, too perfect, too still. I didn't say anything to my boyfriend. He was focused on the road, half zoned out, letting the music fill the silence. I just kept watching them as we got closer and closer. The details became clearer. The old man wore worn-out overalls. His posture was slightly hunched, his movements slow but deliberate. His hair was thin and dark, clinging to the top of his head. The boy, he looked no older than 6 or 7. He wore a bright blue shirt and white sneakers that stood out sharply against the blackened ground. His hair was light, almost white blonde, and curled softly around his head. And then I noticed where they were going. An old well. It stood alone in the middle of that scorched field, cracked, weathered, and completely out of place, like something forgotten or abandoned for a reason. A chill ran down my spine. As we passed them, I could see everything clearly now, every detail, every movement, and that's when it happened. Without warning, the old man stopped. Then, in one smooth, unnatural motion, he picked the boy up. For a split second, I thought maybe he was just lifting him, playing with him. But then, he threw him straight down the well. I screamed, "Oh my God!" My voice shook the silence inside the car as my boyfriend jolted in panic. What? What happened?" My hands were already fumbling through my bag, desperately searching for my phone. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might explode. He just threw a kid down a well," I shouted. My boyfriend stared at me, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" He hadn't seen anything, not a single thing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I finally pulled it out, unlocked it. No signal. 0 bars. My heart dropped. "Drive," I told my boyfriend, my voice trembling. "Just drive faster. There's a town up ahead. We need to call the police." He didn't argue this time. He pressed harder on the gas, the engine growling as we sped down the empty highway. I kept looking back, expecting to see something,
anything. But the field behind us was just black and lifeless again, like nothing had ever been there. A few minutes later, we reached a small town, the kind of place that felt frozen in time. The first building we saw was a little roadside diner, Al's Kitchen. We pulled into the parking lot before the car even fully stopped. I jumped out and rushed inside, nearly slipping as I pushed through the door. Every head turned toward me. The room went silent. "I need to use your phone," I said breathlessly. The woman behind the counter nodded, confused but concerned. She slid the phone toward me. I dialed 911 immediately. My voice was shaking as I explained everything. How I saw an old man throw a child down a well in the burned fields just outside of town. As I spoke, I could feel it. Everyone in the diner was listening. By the time I said the words, "He threw the boy down the well," gasps rippled through the room. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was. A deputy would be sent immediately. I hung up, my hands still trembling. The silence in the diner felt heavy, uncomfortable, wrong. A man stood up from one of the tables and slowly approached us. He introduced himself, his tone calm but serious. "You said burned fields?" he asked. I nodded. He exchanged a glance with another man in the diner. Then he asked me to describe the old man I had seen. I told him everything. The overalls, the thinning dark hair, his posture. As I spoke, I saw it happen. Recognition, not confusion, recognition. Someone muttered a name, Art Landry. The room filled with uneasy whispers. They all knew him, and according to them, his grandson had been staying with him that week. The air shifted. People looked at each other nervously. Some of them shook their heads, almost in denial. That doesn't make sense. Art wouldn't do something like that. Are you sure you saw it right? That question again. Are you sure? It made my stomach twist. I know what I saw, I said firmly. He threw the boy into a well. But the more I insisted, the more they became uneasy. Not shocked, not outraged, just uncomfortable. After what felt like forever, a police deputy finally arrived. We stepped outside to talk. I explained everything again, every detail, every second of what I saw. He listened, but his expression didn't change much. It wasn't urgency, it wasn't alarm, it was doubt. Then another police car pulled in. The sheriff himself stepped out. The deputy explained the situation to him, saving me from repeating the story again. The sheriff listened carefully, then walked away to speak on his radio. A few minutes later, he came back. "I've got some good news," he said. My heart lifted for a moment. "The well is empty, and Mr. Landry is on his way here with his grandson. You'll see everything is fine." For a second, I couldn't even process what he just said. Empty? That was impossible. "I saw him throw the boy in," I said, my voice rising. "You need to check again." The sheriff gave me a tight smile. "Ma'am, sometimes things can look different from a moving vehicle. Light, smoke, it can play tricks on your eyes." That word again, tricks, like what I saw wasn't real, like I was imagining things. Panic turned into frustration. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I know what I saw. There was a child. You need to go back and check properly." But the more I pushed, the more they looked at me like I was the problem.
I was still trying to convince the sheriff when we heard it. The low rumble of an engine pulling into the parking lot. Everyone turned. An old, beat-up truck rolled to a stop. The driver's door creaked open, and a large man stepped out. Overalls, thinning dark hair. My heart dropped. It was him, the same man I had seen in the field. He didn't look confused. He looked angry. "Now who's sayin' I threw my grandson down a well?" he barked, his voice sharp and defensive. The sheriff stepped in quickly. "Easy now, Art. She's just trying to help." But the man, Art Landry, wasn't calming down. He walked around to the passenger side of the truck and yanked the door open. "Come on," he said. A small boy climbed out. Art grabbed his hand and led him toward us. "This is my grandson," he said firmly, "the one she thinks I threw down a well." My boyfriend leaned in slightly and whispered, "See, everything's fine." But everything was not fine, because the moment I looked at that boy, my stomach twisted. Something was wrong, very wrong. The boy standing in front of me was not the same boy I had seen. This child had short, dark hair. The one I saw in the field had light blonde curls. I knew it. I was sure of it. "That's not him," I said quietly at first, then louder. "That's not the same kid." The sheriff sighed, clearly losing patience. "Ma'am, you were driving. The lighting, the smoke from the burned fields, it can make things look different." The deputy nodded in agreement. "Hair can look lighter in the sun," he added. Their explanations felt forced, like they had already decided what the truth was, and it wasn't mine. "I know what I saw," I insisted, my voice shaking. "That man threw a different child into that well." The tension in the air thickened instantly. The people from the diner had gathered outside now, watching everything unfold. But no one supported me. No one backed me up. They just stood there, silent. The sheriff pulled my boyfriend aside. They spoke quietly for a few minutes. When he came back, his face looked uneasy. "We need to leave," he said under his breath. "What? Why?" I asked. "The sheriff thinks you're causing a disturbance," he replied carefully. "He said if we don't leave, they might arrest you." I felt like the ground had just dropped beneath me. "They're threatening to arrest me?" I whispered. My boyfriend nodded. "They think you're accusing an innocent man." At that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear came back, but this time it was different, darker, heavier. It wasn't just about what I saw anymore. It was about everyone else. The way they looked at me, the way they dismissed everything so quickly, the way no one seemed to actually care if there was another child out there, possibly dying. I forced a weak apology. "I'm sorry to Art Landry," I said. "I must have been mistaken." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded stiffly. But his eyes, there was something cold in them, something that made my skin crawl. We got back in the car and drove away. The moment we left town and got a signal, I called the state police. I reported everything again, every detail, every suspicion. I told them I believed something was seriously wrong in that town. But days later, I got a response. "There's nothing to report." That was it. No investigation, no follow-up, nothing. To this day, I know what I saw. I've never hallucinated before. I don't have vision problems, and I wasn't tired. That old man, he threw a child into that well, and somehow, everyone else chose not to see it. My father used to work for the Foreign Office, and that's how he met my mother while stationed in Peru. Growing up, her culture was always a big part of my life. The food, the music, the stories, all of it stayed with me. But strangely enough, I had only visited Peru once as a child. So in my late 20s, I decided it was time to go back, to reconnect with that part of myself, to meet relatives I barely knew, and explore the country on my own terms. At first, everything was perfect. The landscapes were breathtaking. The roads stretched endlessly through mountains and quiet villages. It felt like I was rediscovering something I had lost years ago. Until the day everything went wrong. I was driving alone on a remote back road, trying to find the small town where some of my relatives lived. The road was quiet, too quiet. No other cars, no people, just endless stretches of empty land. Then I saw it. Flashing lights. In my rearview mirror, a police car. I pulled over immediately. I hadn't done anything wrong, so I wasn't worried at first. I just assumed it was a routine stop. But the moment the police car stopped behind me, something felt off. The officer didn't step out casually like you'd expect. He stayed behind his door. And then, through a loudspeaker, his voice blasted across the empty road. "Put your hands out the window." My heart skipped. "What?" I muttered under my breath. For a second, I thought I misunderstood. But then he shouted again, "Hands out the window, now!" This time, there was no confusion, only fear. I slowly raised my hands outside the window, my mind racing. What was going on? Why was he acting like this? I hadn't even been speeding. The officer stepped out of his car, gun drawn, pointed directly at me. My chest tightened instantly. I had barely ever seen a gun in real life before. Now one was aimed at my face. "I'm unarmed," I shouted. "I don't understand. What's happening?" "Shut up," he yelled back. "Don't move." His voice was sharp, aggressive, like he already believed I was dangerous. He approached slowly, keeping the gun trained on me the entire time. Every step he took felt like it echoed through my skull. One wrong move, and that trigger could slip. He reached my window and tried to cuff me one-handed, still aiming the gun with the other. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm just visiting." "Quiet," he snapped again. Then, suddenly, more sirens. Within minutes, more police cars arrived. Doors slammed, boots hit the ground, and before I could even process what was happening, they dragged me out of the car, forced me to the ground, cuffed me. People were shouting things in Spanish I could barely understand, but a few words stood out, words that made my blood run cold. Murderer, violator, children. My mind went blank. What did they think I had done? I was just visiting. I was thrown into the back of a police vehicle, and as the door slammed shut, one terrifying thought settled in my mind. This wasn't a mistake, at least not to them. The police station was like a nightmare frozen in time. Dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across the grimy walls. The air smelled of mildew, sweat, and something metallic I couldn't identify. Every sound, footsteps, doors slamming, murmurs felt amplified, as if the building itself was listening. I was shoved into a small holding cell. The metal bars were cold under my hands, and the echo of the lock clicking behind me sent a shiver down my spine. I could hear distant voices, other prisoners maybe, or officers, but nothing made sense. Then someone approached. A man. His face, it was like looking into a cracked mirror. My own features twisted slightly, wearing a dark, sinister smile. He didn't speak. He just stared. And the longer I looked, the more I felt my heart sink into an icy pit of fear. He tilted his head slowly, like he knew something I didn't. And then he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I jumped back, pressing myself against the cold wall. Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man didn't answer. He faded into the shadows as silently as he appeared, leaving me with a growing sense of dread. Something about him was wrong. Not just the face, but the presence. It was like the air itself had thickened, suffocating me. I sat on the metal bench, trying to calm down, but the fear wouldn't leave. My mind raced, replaying every detail of my journey, every road I had driven alone, every turn I had taken. And then it hit me. The place I was taken to, it wasn't marked on any map. It was as if I had been pulled into a forgotten part of the country, one that existed outside reality. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't feel real anymore. I couldn't see the sun, couldn't hear the world outside, only the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional distant shout. Then one of the officers returned. He didn't look like before. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He spoke to me in broken English, but the meaning was clear. They say you killed them." "What?" I shouted. My voice bounced off the metal walls. "I've done nothing. I'm just visiting." "You look like him. He looks like you." And that's when the terror truly sunk in. I wasn't just mistaken for someone. I was being accused of the deeds of a man who looked exactly like me, a man I had never met, a man whose crimes were dark and horrifying. I begged, I pleaded, but no one listened. Their eyes weren't seeing me, they were seeing him. As night fell outside, I sat alone in that cell, shadows crawling across the walls like living creatures. Every sound, every movement, every whisper felt like it was coming from the man who wore my face. And then, just as I was beginning to think I might survive the night, a voice echoed from the far corner of the cell. "You can't run from me." The voice in the shadows wasn't just words, it was a presence, a cold, creeping darkness that seemed to wrap around my chest, making it hard to breathe. I froze, staring into the corner, expecting nothing. But then, slowly, a figure emerged. It was him, the man with my face. But this time he moved with an unnatural grace, like shadows themselves carried him. His eyes glimmered in the dim light, black, endless voids that seemed to pierce through my soul. "You've lived my life, even if you didn't know it," he whispered, "and now you belong to me." I stumbled back, heart hammering, pressing myself against the wall. My mind screamed, trying to fight the impossible truth. Every step he took was silent, yet deafening. Every breath I took felt like I was inhaling ice. Then, suddenly, he reached out, and the world shifted. I wasn't in the cell anymore. I was standing on a dark, empty road under a blood-red sky. The town around me was abandoned, broken, and rotting. Every building whispered secrets of horrors past. And there in the distance, I saw dozens of figures, all wearing my face, staring, waiting. I ran. My legs burned, but no matter how fast I moved, the faceless shadows mirrored me perfectly, closing in. The man, or was it me, was always just behind, whispering that same chilling line, "You can't escape yourself."
I woke up in my own bed the next morning. Sunlight poured in through the window, warm and bright. For a moment, I thought it had been a nightmare, but then I saw it. On the bathroom mirror, written in condensation, "We are watching." And I knew. The man who looked like me wasn't gone. He was always there, waiting, watching, because somewhere, somehow, he and I were the same. I grew up in Bart Township, a place so isolated that even the wind seemed to whisper secrets to itself. Surrounded by Amish farms and endless fields, life was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes shadows feel alive. I was only 14 when October 2nd, 2006 turned everything into a waking nightmare. That morning, my little brother came running toward our farmhouse, tears streaking his dirt-smudged face. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror I'd never seen. "There's a man in our classroom with a gun," he stammered, shaking. The words hit me like ice water. My father grabbed his rifle instinctively while I tried to steady my racing heart. But that was only the beginning. Minutes earlier, in the old schoolhouse, a pickup truck had pulled up silently, like a predator circling its prey. A man emerged, face obscured by shadows, moving with the precision of someone who had killed before. He asked the teacher about a clevis pin, seemingly harmless, then, without warning, returned wielding a pistol. The man's voice cut through the classroom like a razor. "Do as I say, or you die." Children froze. Fear hung thick in the air, suffocating and electric. The teacher tried reasoning, thinking it was a simple robbery, but the man had something far more sinister in mind. He forced the boys to carry tools, a shotgun, a stun gun, and a tangle of wires, chains, and metal eye hooks into the classroom. All the while, the shadow of death crept over the room, whispering that no one would leave unscathed. The teacher made a desperate run for help, but the man's presence was suffocating. He returned to barricade the doors, trapping the children inside with him and with the unknown horrors he had planned. Outside, the world was oblivious, unaware of the nightmare unfolding just beyond the farmhouse fields. By 11 a.m., a crowd had gathered outside the schoolhouse. Ambulances lined the road, their sirens silent witnesses to the terror inside. The first shots rang out, and a sound of collective horror erupted from the crowd. Screams, sobs, and the sharp metallic echo of gunfire. Inside, the man's aim was deadly, precise, and merciless. He forced the children and the teacher to obey, each command heavy with the threat of immediate death. The boys, trembling, obeyed as the man orchestrated his grim performance, stacking tools, wires, and chains around them like instruments of torture. The girls were lined up against the chalkboard, their wide eyes reflecting the terror in the dim, dusty light. Through the open windows, flashes of gunfire illuminated the room in jagged bursts, shadows dancing across terrified faces. The man's threats were relentless, his voice a low, growling menace that reverberated in the minds of everyone trapped inside. Quiet, or the next one dies first. Every second stretched into an eternity. The fear was tangible, a living, breathing entity pressing against the walls. Outside, the cops arrived, their sirens cutting through the dense air. They pleaded through loudspeakers, begging the man to surrender, but he was a phantom of rage and control,
holding life and death in his hands. And then the unthinkable began. Gunshots cracked like lightning inside the classroom. The air smelled of blood, iron, and terror. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the echo of cries and the cold shadow of death stalking the children.
When the SWAT team finally burst through the barricaded doors, the classroom was a horrifying scene frozen in time. The armed man lay dead, a self-inflicted gunshot ending the nightmare. But the air still reeked of fear, sweat, and gunpowder. The children who had survived were trembling, their small hands covered in dust and blood, their wide eyes reflecting the terror they had endured. The aftermath was a nightmare wrapped in grief. Parents wept, children clung to one another, and the small town of Windsor would never be the same. The man's intentions, whether robbery or malevolent control, had left a scar that would echo for decades. Every detail, the chains, the hooks, the menacing calm, would replay in the minds of those who survived, haunting them like a relentless ghost. Even now, years later, those who were there remember the cold, calculated cruelty, the way fear had filled every corner of that room, and how in the shadow of death, some lives were spared for reasons no one could fully understand. The darkness of that day became a permanent shadow over Bart Township's history, a chilling reminder that evil can descend on the most ordinary of towns without warning. I grew up in a remote corner of Bart Township, Pennsylvania, where the land stretched wide, dotted with the quiet, stoic Amish farms. Life was simple, rigid, and isolated, the kind of place where outsiders were English, and the nights were thick with the heavy silence of endless fields. The only sounds were the distant clop of horse hooves, the rustling of corn stalks, and the occasional creak of old wooden barns. October 2nd, 2006 started like any other day. I was helping my dad with chores. My little brother had gone to school, and the sun filtered weakly through the skeletal branches of the surrounding trees. Everything seemed normal until the air grew heavy, almost suffocating, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, my dad squinted into the distance. "Is that your brother?" he asked. My heart sank as I saw him, my little brother, sprinting toward the farmhouse, pale, trembling, and wide-eyed. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He collapsed in front of us, shaking, stammering words that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. A man in his classroom with a gun, chains, hooks. The worst kind of darkness had entered our lives, creeping silently into the heart of our small town. By the time we reached the old schoolhouse, the sun was high enough to cast long, trembling shadows across the fields. My dad bolted toward the building, leaving me to watch over my mom and brother, hearts hammering like the frantic drumming of some ancient ritual. Inside, the ordinary classroom had transformed into a chamber of horror. A man had entered, a predator cloaked in normalcy, asking about a clevis pin, a mundane detail masking the malevolence in his eyes. But then he returned, gun drawn, his movements cold, deliberate, and merciless. Every corner of that schoolroom seemed to breathe tension.
Chains rattled, hooks glinted under the fluorescent lights, and the very walls felt like they were closing in. The girls were lined up against the chalkboard, trembling, whispers of fear spilling into the air. Some even begged to be shot first, hoping it would spare their friends. Outside, sirens wailed, but inside, time had slowed, stretching each second into an eternity of terror. The first cops arrived minutes later, shouting commands, their presence both a beacon of hope and another reminder of the thin line between life and death. Shots rang out, the sickening echo of gunfire, screams, and desperate cries for mercy filled the air. And then silence, thick, suffocating, leaving only the smell of gunpowder and despair. When the police finally burst into the classroom, the nightmare had ended, but the horrors lingered. The man lay dead, a self-inflicted wound silencing his violence, but the echoes of gunshots and screams haunted every corner. The girls, frozen in terror moments ago, now clung to each other, trembling, their wide eyes reflecting a fear that would never fully fade. The scent of gunpowder, sweat, and panic hung thickly in the air. Desks were overturned, chains and hooks lay scattered like grotesque relics of the chaos, and the floor was stained in dark, ominous patterns that whispered of lost innocence. Even as the survivors were guided out, the memory of the ordeal clung like a shadow, refusing to release its grip. In Bart Township, a place where life had been simple, the old rhythms of the farm and the quiet streets were forever tainted. That day, June 6, 1993, would live on in hushed tones and haunted glances, a chilling reminder that terror could strike anywhere, even in the most unsuspecting towns. And for those who were there, the ordinary walls of a classroom would forever echo the unimaginable, leaving scars deeper than the eye could see.